Oh, there's a countdown too. Okay. So we are live with Jorge Castro, who is it fair to call you a founding father of Project Bluefin?
I guess. I mean, it's kind of just like a script of stuff that I just decided to brand. But sure, if uh,
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, George. Maybe you can tell us how you got into this whole Linux thing, which now dominates the world.
mhm.
Your a little bit of your work history and what inspired you to make a new Linux flavor.
Yeah. So I've been using Linux for a long time. 94 was my first one. My friend helped me install Slackware. It was a bunch of floppies back back when the installation would fail. The floppy 21 would fail. You'd have to start all the way over. That kind of stuff. Um, and like just kind of always has been growing up on alternate operating systems and Linux and stuff like that. So got to observe all that, and then eventually got into the industry when Ubuntu came out, 2004. A friend sent me an ISO before it had come out, so I had a few day head start knowing what was coming. Ended up working at Canonical for a long time, actually, about 10 years. Um, Discovered Kubernetes around the same time everyone else did, and got the opportunity to join the cloud native community, which is where I am today. But always kind of had that itch to kind of play with like command line stuff, Unix tools. I love watching your top 10 CLI commands and neat bash tricks. Like I'm that guy. I'm that guy that watches all those YouTube videos and stuff, and I'm always kind of playing with things. Um, so in KubeCon Detroit, um, Colin Walters, who's one of the primary authors of the way that we are consuming and building Bluefin uh, via the Fedora CoreOS project, kind of explained to me, you know, this is this is what we're moving to, like um, uh, based around like an OCI pattern and a Docker file, and everyone has their favorite customizations, scripts, Ansible playbooks, dot file managers, all that kind of stuff on GitHub. Um, so when I kind of figured out, he explained to me that we could just have a Docker file in Git and it spits out an entire bootable operating system. Some friends and I got together and we were like, hey, let's make a like it's not a distribution, it's Fedora, and we modify it. So let's just make a thing for us, right? Like the kind of person that wants all the cool tools that we'll be talking about today. One of my target audiences for developer experience images is people like you and me. We play with Kubernetes. Uh, every day there's like a cool new tool. You go to KubeCon, you come out, you're like, I gotta try all this stuff. Um, and I was like, man, it'd be really great if we could have if I could just have that. So it kind of grew from not just only providing like a just general cool version of Fedora that has the codecs built in, NVIDIA drivers, all this kind of stuff. Um, what if we could use it as an avenue to deliver cloud native tech right to the client at a time where people are starting to talk about local compute being important again? Like if you see what Kelsey Hightower's tweeting about lately, it's about um, local dev is cool, and everyone got their new Macs, right? And they're like, hey, wait a minute, this thing is fast, right? So I feel like there's like a new interest in local development, and as cloud folks, I like to think we're only a few variable changes away from pushing that to any cloud that we want. So why not have a sandbox? Like, why not use our desktop as the avenue to unlock all of the cool cloud native stuff that we're doing? And at first, I was like, nobody cares, right? Like, my few friends thought it was cool. Brian Kettleson uh, is helping me on this, and we're getting a few other people. I've made some new friends and that kind of stuff. And as I started shopping around, once people started to see it, they're like, yeah, why can't I just have everything that I see in the landscape automatically. Like we know it's in package managers, right? Like anyone on their Mac can brew install, but I think the mantra kind of became obvious when we decided to put kind on the image, which is Kubernetes and Docker, and that's a tool that upstream Kubernetes developers use when they're building Kubernetes to test it and stuff like that. So you can do kind create cluster, and then you have it. And it was like, wow, well, if your desktop just came with a Kubernetes cluster out of the box that you could set up, right? The binary itself is small, but you also have the options to run K3s or just raw Podman or raw Docker. What if OSs just came that way? All we got to do is organize all the other stuff,
Right. Yeah,
So
that's something that I love about the experience thus far that I've had with Bluefin is, of course it preaches to my cool tools heart, right? You mentioned a lot of us coming in from there, but it's also I think it's opinionated, but it's opinionated for people who are, I've been writing a lot about how like the local dev environment is really just another piece of the testing story, right? Because your software is, if it's going to be deployed on Kubernetes, if it's going to be deployed on a cloud, crafting your developer environment to be as close as possible, to be consuming the same sort of artifacts, exposing the same sort of engines that we use in prod, that's going to really help you catch a lot of things earlier, right? That's the shifting left story. So, yeah.
And a lot of it exists. Someone told me, I was showing them Bluefin at lunch or something at KubeCon, and they were like, the perfect Unix desktop, the perfect Unix desktop is at this conference. It's just spread out across everybody's laptops, right? And like every cool setup that you want, some nerd has tweaked that. It's all like a field person, right? Has tweaked it to run perfectly on the local node, so it demos really well. Why can't I have that?
Yeah, so let's talk a little. I think this is a good entry point into Bluefin and Bluefin's mission, because like you said, there's the perfect Unix OS. It's out there. It's on the show floor on everybody's local machines. How is Bluefin sort of bringing that vision into a Linux flavor? And what's if you had to give me your 5-second elevator pitch, and then maybe talk about the mission of Bluefin.
Yeah. So there's two users that I'm going after. The first one is the easy one, which is actually the hard one, is just general people who want a working computer. There are so many. So I live close to a major University of Michigan, and their property disposition, when they get rid of old hardware, they auction it off to the public. And there's just so much hardware out there. Just so much hardware out there. And modern computers are just so powerful, right? And in an age where we're talking about sustainability, the environment, things like that, we just have pallets and pallets of these computers, that don't give people the nice experience, like when you go buy your new Mac, right? Our audience have really nice hardware, and they can do that stuff. So one of the first things I did is I spent $200 on an old Dell 7390 Latitude, and it runs Kubernetes great. I use it as a media consumption device. And I was like, why hasn't anyone explicitly made an operating system to do that? Now, people have told you, you could recycle a no machine by putting Linux on it. But what makes things like Bluefin different using this Core OS model, it's a Core OS for desktop, so it's like image based, and upgrades are atomic. There's no on Ubuntu machines, if you do an upgrade and you added a third party packager or package repo and it breaks, that kind of things. We've flipped the model to be more cloud native, so everything gets built in CI, and that kind of gives us that Chromebook reliability that we kind of want, but you kind of can't get with a traditional Linux distribution. So we get that reliability of that Chromebook, but the real power of like a traditional Linux desktop, right? Like I want to run fat apps, right? And I have an older Chromebook, but it doesn't support running Linux in their container setup and things like that. And up until recently, Chromebooks, the lifetime on them wasn't even that long. Schools were getting Chromebooks well, by the time they get to the schools, they were running out of like official support. And meanwhile, we have all these old computers that businesses are, recycling and things like that. Why don't we put all that stuff to work? So that was the kind of idea there, especially when you think about all the. I mean, how many tools did you see at KubeCon for managing large clusters, right? And images
Right.
and things like that.
Yeah.
You could reuse a lot of these tools to manage these clients. So I use the Cockpit software, which is what Red Hat makes, and it's designed to manage servers and things like that. And we're kind of like figuring out ways to make that manage my little fleet of laptops. Why isn't there an open source version of the Chromebook ecosystem that anyone could run with anything?
Can we show off two of those features? Maybe we can show off the how it consumes images, how it updates using images, and maybe we can show off Cockpit. Okay, great.
Yeah. So I don't have
let's move
Cockpit
in
on
here.
this machine.
Okay.
However, the screenshots and stuff are great. I think a lot of this will be being made aware of this, and also some of this stuff has been aspirational so far because it took us about a year to get base images going and building the infrastructure and things in GitHub. So it was kind of like, this stuff can work on sorry, I lost my train of thought. This stuff can work. We know conceptually we can work, and then you can fire it up. But there's a difference between that and like packaging it up in a way that's consumable for people and doing things like that. So this is Cockpit. It looks like what you think a web UI should look like for managing a machine. And it does services. It has a web terminal. So this is the kind of tool I envision that you install on your machine, and then it could just connect to my dad's machine, and then I can, do updates and stuff in the background, or
right. So this is similar to Google's Chromebook admin panel that they use to like manage fleets of Chromebooks at schools, for example. Right? You would use Cockpit the same way.
That's what I'm hoping to do. I actually found out locally. I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and there's something like 21,000 Chromebooks in this school system in this alone. And now that it took us a while to get the base images, I'm only just now getting to the point where like I'm trying to have lunch with one of the IT administrators and get to it. And I'm trying to figure out people who are interested in this problem to come help us out, tell us what we need, because the building pieces are there. I think part of the appeal of a model like this is we want to reuse things that people are using at work for load-bearing structures and be able to reuse that for client. Because one of the reasons the Linux desktop has kind of struggled is it's relatively expensive to maintain, but not the usage, the economics don't work out, right? Whereas in cloud, it's pretty obvious, we add this value to companies and then they pay us, right? And with the Linux desktop, never quite reached that level of success. So one of the theories I've been trying out that we kind of like realized halfway through was like, if we just reuse all the same stuff that you would use to manage your clusters at work, and those are all OCI containers, could we make the pipeline cheaper? Like
Right.
building and shipping Linux configs and stuff like that. And that's why I think that they were smart to kind of choose the OCI standard to build all this with, because most of the people that have been contributing, especially in the early days, and the early prototypes, they weren't using Linux desktops. They're Mac people, but they know how to cloud, right? So, they helped me put together the Docker files and things like that, and helping out with GitHub Actions and stuff. That's stuff that ops people are very familiar with, right? It just, the payload is different,
Can we see how Bluefin consumes images in order to update?
Yeah,
And
yeah. So let me give you a quick tour of the uh, of the GitHub repo. Can you see that there? Oh,
yeah,
actually,
yeah, I
hold
can see
on,
it.
hold on.
Yeah, because
We have a
I just
diagram.
I want to highlight to users how
Yeah.
it's the same. So these same images that we're deploying to our Kubernetes clusters at work,
Yep.
these we're it's the same idea here for but running
Right.
on your desktop.
Right.
Yeah.
So the base for this is technology called OS tree, which is like a Git like structure, and then that has the kernel, the whole OS, everything, and then it just gets shoved in an OCI container, and you build it that way, and we derive that way. However, on the actual machine, it's like we only use it as a transport mechanism. What's actually running on your computer would be the same as if you were. It feels like normal Fedora. Like if you sat next to me on a plane, you would, actually, you would think I was using Ubuntu because the container runtime is now a primary primitive of the Linux desktop. So your terminals and stuff, you can actually run what you want. So I came from Ubuntu. Uh, so my terminals every day are actually Ubuntu terminals. And when you sit next to me, it just looks like I'm using Ubuntu, but I'm using all this OCI technology, on the back end. So in order to do that, so all the stuff I said about, we should make reliable desktops and things like that. Um, like I made a terrible imperative version, and then my friends helped me kind of make that into, it was just a dumb script written by a community manager because that's what I am. And then we kind of started to build it. And in order to make Bluefin, we had to make good base images because the container model lets you fork kind of infinitely, right? So immediately I showed it to Justin Garrison, and he was like, "This is neat," but I use a tiling window manager. I was like, "Oh man, I gotta make a bunch of these now." So we went into GitHub and we templated out just like you would a container file, all the little, one for KDE, one for GNOME, one for your tiling window manager, one for XFCE, one for Cinnamon, and those are what we call the main images. And what
Right.
we do is we take config, which is a bunch of UDEV rules, um, that we added for things like game controllers. Uh,
Because you're even shipping to Steam Deck.
yeah,
So
yeah, right. Because for
yeah.
some reason or another, like Fedora is making a general purpose operating system, right? And there's some things that, having worked at a distro, it's kind of tough to summarize just how difficult it can be to ship certain things at sometimes, but it takes a long time, right? Whereas with this model, you're like, well, I could just git clone what I need and shove it in the Docker file, right? And then you're good to go. So that's what we started doing, and some service units in here to set up the automatic updates because Fedora doesn't do that by default. They want the user to explicitly update. Where I wanted to actually see, my Chromebook auto updates. So why not my framework laptop that has known good Linux compatibility? What does that feel like? Or will it be a disaster?
Right.
Um,
And I'm running framework too. We all love framework here. I've
yeah, isn't
got
it great?
I've got the Bluefin mascot. Maybe we can see the Bluefin mascot is a Deinonychus anteropus. I hope I'm
Yeah,
getting that right.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I
yeah. I
think
picked a dinosaur for her
it's
because she has
dinosaur
like
prey, right? Yeah.
yeah, she has like a story to tell about sustainability and onboarding new contributors and all this kind of all that stuff is actually way harder than making this. um, and then so we take that's actually like a small container. It might even be a scratch container because all we're shipping is text files. And then the main images spit out um, a bunch of stuff. So by the time it gets done, if you look at our GitHub page, at our org packages, you see all of the images that are being published. So this is Silver Blue, which is Fedora's default GNOME desktop with the NVIDIA driver, is our most popular at 348,000. We have about 2.5 million pulls so far when we added them all up. This Kinoite NVIDIA, that's KDE with NVIDIA. This is the non-NVIDIA one. And then you'll find the framework ones in here. We're
And
working on Surface ones for the Surface
I think
devices.
it's also worth mentioning how easy it is to jump between flavors, right? So we can open up a terminal like, right now, and we could even say
Let's do it.
RPM OS tree, right?
Yep.
Rebase.
Well, I
And
always do a
yeah,
status first because you want to see where you are.
sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and so this here's a tip. This little dot tells you what you're booted into. So I am booted into, let's see, this is from October 7th, actually. I'm being a bad boy. Because I don't typically use the studio as often, only to record videos. But it's been updating every day. It does the updates, and it has them staged right here. So if I reboot, I would go into this new image there, and it's
And we actually have Fedora 39 is available, and of course we have an image in Bluefin, so we could
yep,
even rebase
yep. So you
forward to
could
it.
do RPM OS tree rebase. This this command is going to get a lot better. It's just going to be boot C switch, and then not all this Docker stuff. When we started, the images weren't signed by us. However, we've always let me just rebase to 39. I have nothing to lose if you can rebase, and you
Right.
have nothing to lose, right?
I think this is really great to highlight the benefits here, because you can jump between any flavor you want, if and it's atomic, which means nothing's left behind except for your own user files in your home, right? And you're just consuming the same sort of Docker images, that your container images, that you would at work, when you're pushing. So it's all the same, right? Like, we're dealing in the same concept space, and that is incredibly powerful, I think.
You can, how do you Scopio inspect? Do you remember?
Oh
or
gosh,
Docker inspect?
I can look it up. Yeah.
Images. No, I think we want Podman images here.
Right. Yeah, because Podman comes out of the box.
Yep. And is it Scopio inspect?
I think it's.
I know how to do this. It's just hard to do it on the.
No, of course. Let's see. Scopio inspect.
And then is gcr.io/uBlueOS.
Yeah, so it should just be the Docker and then
like
my image.
Okay?
Let me check here.
Oh, I think you need to do the Docker colon.
You need the Docker, I think, in front. Yep.
There it goes.
That should work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are all the hashes of each layer, right?
Yep. And our layers last, and it's like a big one. So we are going to need container diffs at some point, but people way more senior than me are aware of this problem, and that's just a community thing that's going to happen. However, it's mostly transparent to me. I tell people, if you're unmetered, it kind of sucks, but it's just not there for that. But that's a solvable problem. It's just a matter of time. But usually it's in the background. I don't even notice. But
and then if something goes wrong with this update, you can just roll back to the last known good image, right?
Yeah. Yep. You type OS tree rollback, I believe is the command, and you go to the back one. You can pin. So by default, they'll keep 2 copies for you. You can pin as many as you want, considering however much disk space you want. However, one of the nice things about being able to have it being a container is you can use anything you want. So by default, GitHub gives us 90 days of image archive. So I could go back to any of these images, which is very handy. And one of the differences between this versus doing something like file system snapshots, right? Like we could tell, hey, everybody in the channel, switch to the NVIDIA driver from this day and see if you can confirm this bug for this exact day for this app. Like you can do that versus it's like, oh no, I didn't take a file system snapshot that day. I don't know. And then you find yourself, trying to figure out packages and stuff. Like it's just, nope, I just rebase. It's more of a Git command than that other things. And people would just try all sorts of stuff now that it's an OCI container. Like someone just tried to pipe an image into Docker Slim. That didn't work. But you can use ORAS, Scopio, Docker Inspect. I only recently am happy with the Docker setup that we have. It's just this machine. I haven't set it up yet. So on the DX, we were having confusion with people trying to make the transition to Podman, right? Because Docker Compose doesn't work, and people need that. Um, so having an image, we're just like, okay, we'll just include Docker on the image itself, and then you could just switch between them, turn them back on and off, and
Right.
you'll get
Yeah.
what you want.
Maybe
Yeah.
we could talk about community, I think, and we can
Oh, here you
also
go.
talk about the way. Did it finish?
This is all the changes. So the nice thing is these are still RPM. It's still Fedora. Like some people are like, I don't want to run a weird thing. It is kind of a weird thing, but it's still a Linux distro underneath. I want to make sure that people understand that point. Like we automate the updates and stuff, and you're getting them at least every day. We cron every day to run images, and then anytime we make an improvement, the GitHub kicks off. The builder makes the image. It pushes to the registry. We sign it with cosign, and then you're getting the goodness there. So I'm hoping to work close. We're starting to work closer together with Fedora people in order to make that loop a little bit tighter and cleaner. So hope that explains that. But yeah,
Cool,
once I
yeah.
reboot, I will be in Fedora 39, and if there's a regression with my hardware or something, I can always revert back. No reinstall or things like that. So
Yeah.
It's
Let's see.
Cool. Yeah.
So I wanted to get into. I'll just take over for quickly to show off some of the community, like how you're really trying to build a community project around Bluefin, and also how easy it is to to wit. I just opened a PR about 15 minutes before our live stream. And it's really easy to contribute. So just to take a look here, if I zoom in, you can see that here. So Bluefin is, and jump in anytime to correct me, Bluefin is using a tool called Just, which is kind of like Make. Everybody's sort of familiar with the old Unix tool Make, except it uses YAML. And so it's really easy if you've like ever touched if you've ever touched a like any YAML file, any Kubernetes manifest, you'll fit right in. And so here, so if you type in just Docker into your terminal, it'll actually it'll enable this Docker integration without anything else. And I just love that, like, you're able to just, and if you want to, like, you have a cloud native project like ours here at Garden. Garden.io. I was able to contribute this 15 minutes ahead of this this talk, and it was really easy to understand because it's just my Garden key here. This is the key of the command that you're going to enter, and then it's the bash script, right? So this basically installs it on a developer's local machine. So a developer could conceivably run Bluefin, type in just Garden, and then they would be ready to go with Garden. So that's something I really loved. Yep. And maybe you can speak more about the community aspects that you're trying to grow Bluefin around.
Yeah. So what we needed, I just want to give Just its due deserts, because I actually learned that about that from Cloud, from Server. There was a friend introduced me to it. He's like, we have projects written in every language, right? And I forget how to serve npm Python. I'm browsing around, so they had Just files in all their projects. So just build always built the thing, just serve always served the thing. So anywhere in the company you could go in there and just serve, and it would do the thing. And they just did that by doing Just files and then putting the specific information in there, and it was in version control and the root of the repo. It was just a handy idea. So I wanted a way for us to do that. And originally, I was just going to ship examples in like user share examples, just like a bunch of like user share Kubernetes the hard way, right? And you would just go in there, and then the idea was like, okay, and then every night we'll pull that thing and put it in there. But as I shop that idea around, people were like, what we need is like a runner, a task runner. And we didn't want to do something like Bluetooth cuddle or something, even though that sounds awesome. I was like, we could just use just because it has an include feature in beta, so we can have multiple files for different things. So I envision machine learning.just file. So if we have one that's just you type just distrobox-ml on your NVIDIA machine, and it will pull the NVIDIA PyTorch image, and it'll install Hugging Face and a bunch of other little tools on there. And some random person I had never met was like, "Hey, I use PyTorch. Can I put this in there?" And I was like, "Oh yes, please," because it's like we have people who aren't operating system developers but know how to get stuff running. And one of the criticisms, people see this and they're like, this is just a hot mess, right? Like, I can't believe that you're advocating for this, right? And I was like, hey, look, I would love if someone wants to go through and properly package all these tools and put them in the distro and build a thing. That sounds like a lot of work, right? But we know that all of us are doing this anyway. So you know what? Whatever gets you running PyTorch, sure, as long as we're putting the proper disclaimers and things like that. And so for me,
speaking of those ML workflows, maybe we can demonstrate like how easy it is. Docker recently introduced like they call it the Gen AI stack at DockerCon 2023, and your friend actually demoed a cloud native approach to this. Is that correct?
Yeah. Priyanka at KubeCon demoed.
Yeah.
A stack. I hope it works.
Well, disclaimer to everyone watching. It does. We're doing it live.
We're doing it live.
It's working.
We're doing it live.
So this is very exciting, and this actually uses Kind as local Kubernetes flavor to run the Gen AI workload.
Yeah. So let me show it to you working. So give me a prompt here.
Okay. Let's see. What is cloud native?
What is cloud native? Oh, I want to enable this, right?
Oh, that's just if we want to augment it. But yeah, let's try it out.
Oh, it's running, I think.
Okay. Now, I wonder, so if it's running a model locally, then this could be quite slow. Oh, yeah, here it is.
Yeah. So here's the error.
Okay.
So the demo was
we
done
probably would have to set up Olama. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I don't even know if I set up. We were actually preparing earlier. So let's look at the LLM starter pack. I'll make sure you get the URL there. Let me tear down everything. There we go. So the demo was done on a Mac, and Taylor Dolezal, one of my coworkers, had adapted that to work locally on Priyanka's Mac, and that's what she demoed. And while she was doing it, I was looking through the GitHub repos trying to find it, and we didn't have a.
Oh yeah, so the Kind cluster is already up, I think.
Yeah.
Delete it, yeah.
Hold on one second. I think we just want to destroy the cluster, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Is
it Kind delete cluster?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't think it's.
But I think what we could do is we can always like jump back on together and do a walkthrough of Bluefin and how easy it makes it to
nuts.
Talk to a model locally or talk to it remote, or I love how powerful it is out of the box, because all of those container tools are ready for you. If you want Kubernetes, you've got Kubernetes. If you want Podman, you've got Podman. If you want Docker, you've got Docker. So I think this could be a really powerful demo of sort of the capabilities of.
Yeah, and I did have it working. Unfortunately, in order to prepare for this, I kind of broke it and haven't really. This is this is very interesting because I've been working on it even at night on my spare time because we didn't have x86 binaries, and we set up the infrastructure and things like that. So like see how I had to do setup.sh and all that stuff. I want to make that just demo, right? And
Right.
then
Yeah. It just pulls the
and
whole
then
thing down.
have that work. So like there's definitely, I'm only just, this KubeCon was when I kind of started to shift from building things to the pipeline is ready, like to deliver the stuff for you. Now we got to get the actual workloads running. But a trick you can do is if you type just, it will tell you all of the setups that we have here. So this here's just an easy one, just benchmark, right? Like you get your new framework. This just runs stress ng with like a, sure, I can look this up, but like why? Just benchmark, good enough. Like or
And you can
change
tell
my
it's
shell
working
for
because
me.
your video is actually like beginning to freeze because it's pushing your system.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Colin King wrote that thing. Just PyTorch. Uh,
Yeah.
that should just that should just work. So these are the things my friend Brian Kettleson reminds me all the time. It's like this is what's actually important, right? Like when I say Bluefin, people think the operating system and that updates and stuff. We're trying to make that thing as impossible as possible and make the delivery of cloud native consumption as awesome as possible, right? So in hindsight, because I'm a relatively new employee to the CNCF, so it's my first KubeCon back, right? And if I had a time machine, I would have made sure that you could just in the audience type just demo and have all that work, right? We're just doing it after this fact. So for Paris, I want to be able, whatever demo we're working on, that's kind of like my little stretch goal for Bluefin is if you can't afford to go to KubeCon in Paris and you've got a computer and you're on Bluefin, you should be able to wield these tools. I try to use strong language. I got a lot of great advice from Tim Hawking, who's one of just the pillars of the Kubernetes community, right? And he's constantly reminding me. He's like, when I open the terminal, I want to feel strong. I want to feel powerful. I want to do that thing. And you should be able to open a terminal, follow along, run it, and then git clone the thing, and then do what you want. And that exists already. People are doing that. Otherwise, nobody would have invented this, right? But I kind of want to keep lowering that barrier to entry. We got to constantly keep lowering the barrier to entry because at the end of the day is we need to also ensure that we're growing the next generation of cloud native maintainers, right? Like we know that is a problem in open source, getting people onboarded, all this stuff. And container runtime on every computer seems like a good place to start for me.
Right. And a lot of people are using container runtimes locally, not just to run Kubernetes clusters, but also to run dev containers, which I use all the time, and you can just hand those off like they're developer workbenches with everything you need that you can just hand off to any other members of your team, whether they're onboarding brand new, and they say, okay, here's all the tools that we use that you can use now, and it's it ships with support in VS Code because Microsoft invented the dev container spec, and Bluefin is ready to go with dev containers out of the box.
Yeah, it's actually dev containers also solves a problem for us because a lot of people that are coming from traditional Linuxes, right? They're like, I need a thing, I need node apt get install, right? And then or you try to use brew and things like that, but then it's different from the system. This system with containers kind of forces you to be decoupled, and a lot of people who have not done container dev, they run into that roadblock, right? They're like, I need to apt get install Apache. That's how I get my web server, right? And so you kind of have to be like, you got to learn dev containers. And we do kind of try to cater, like, you can open up a distro box and have a thing in there and map Like there are people who copy binaries out, and they're kind of trying to do that thing. But what we're kind of leaning towards is dev container. I would love to see a .dev container directory in every cloud native project, right? And that would just give people the opportunity to continue that lowering of the bar of entry into our industry. You know, like if every project you had a dev container, and it just opened up in code or your JetBrains, and it's an open spec that's in the CNCF, right? So like we can get Craig. Like I was at KubeCon with Craig Peters, who works on dev containers. You know, he's like, I'm trying to put these things everywhere, and I was, yes, please, we should do this. You know, if you have the capability to do that, if you have one handy, that'd be.
Yeah. This is a dev container. I can also demo it in a second, but this is one that I created because I wanted to sort of showcase how it could work with Rootless Podman, which actually Bluefin ships out of the box with. So I created this for Bluefin, and you know, just to give you an idea of how simple this is just, it's the same thing. So right, like it's the same concept of Docker file creates an image and we consume the image, right? So we're consuming the image both on an OS level with Bluefin, but then we're also consuming an image on the user level as a developer, right? When you're going. So this is just like a really quick way to get going with like a Python workspace. And what I'm using is DevBox, which is like a Nix tool, to install a set of packages. So in my devbox.json, you can see here, this is just pulling in Exorcism, the CLI tool for Exorcism, which I wrote about in our last newsletter here at Garden. It's you know, if you want to learn a new programming language, this is a really great resource. So you know, anybody could then download my dev container and then open it, and so I can actually try and make this work. Let's try and make this work. So if I go to CD Python.
I'm spelling a built-in programming tutorial.
Yeah.
Like, why not ship it? Tell them to go
terminal.
here, you
know? Right? Absolutely. Let me share. So I'm going to share my whole screen. Window, entire screen. Okay. So now if we go to code dot, oops. Just open this directly.
I'm glad you're showing Windows because there's a lot to learn from the WSL pattern that I'm trying to bring back to Linux.
Yeah, so the reason I want to be clear that the reason why I'm using Windows and not Bluefin as of now is because I installed Bluefin on a framework storage card, which is like a little pluggable adapter. It's wonderful. It's amazing. But there were some data corruption issues on the storage card. So I'm working together with framework support to get that replaced. They've been amazing, as they always are. Great company. And I know that you, George, also have some connection with them. But I love my framework. I've had it for basically just about since it came out. And my work was kind enough to pay for it as like as I was onboarding to the company. I was like, this is the computer I want. And it was just coming out. So they hooked me up. Yeah.
We're spreading. I think nerds appreciate that, because one of the problems with running Linux is we had the missing hardware, you know, for years at Canonical, you know, trying to get Broadcom wireless cards to work and all this stuff. And it's still kind of a problem, but you can buy things.
No.
And I wanted that software to match the hardware on the framework to give me kind of the perfect right to repair open source nerd Venn diagram. I feel is a strong community that we can cater to. Oh yeah,
absolutely. So in my devcontainer.json file, I just have a list of extensions that, you know, I want pre-provisioned in my container image, and so it's going to pull into my IDE. It's going to pull in Copilot, Copilot Chat, Copilot Labs, because I love all things AI. It's going to pull in a type checker for Python, and so any Python developer is just going to be ready to go with everything they need. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell VS Code to reload my session from inside the container, and it's going to give me this. It's going to give me a dev container workspace that is you're inside a container image, and if you're running, you can go many levels deep. You can even run Minikube inside this container image.
Yeah. And I think it's important to point out too is having this developer experience be the same whether you're on Bluefin, Windows, or your Mac via dev containers. That's that single thread that people that's what people want.
Right.
If someone has a Mac and they have an old machine that they like, some people are like, I would never switch to that. I kind of like my Mac. I tell them I'm not asking you to switch from your Mac. However, there are people who can't afford Macs, right? If we could give them the same experience, and I still have powerful hardware. I have a Threadripper. I want to enjoy all architectures and all things. And by using the dev container too, it gives us that, for those of you that are just getting into containers, that gives us the flexibility to push this anywhere, right? Serve it from anywhere.
Yeah. I love democratizing access for folks, whether they're on Linux or Mac OS or Windows. Any of these users can just pull this image down, and you can see this now. The dev container is starting up. It's loading my files. It's port forwarding. It's establishing all of this stuff that you don't need to worry about in the background. This is just extra info, and I can even open a terminal inside the container. List files, and it pulls in my local files into the container workspace. So this container image that I'm showcasing here on Windows, it runs exactly the same on Bluefin and everywhere, which is just it fills my heart with joy.
It's like, this is the way, right?
Yeah.
Like, once you get it in front of the right people, because when you're building this in a vacuum, me and Brian and a few other people were like, are people going to like this? I don't know. But then when you get back into the conference circuit and watch and talk to people, how do you have your setup or whatever? And then they tell you, oh, this is what we have. And then you realize that's an option. And also, we're a small hobby project still, right? This is a passion project. My real job has way more important implications than this. So we want to keep that fun. So not having to write an entire developer guide when I could just point you to the dev container documentation that has its own community, right? Its own mailing list, its own questions and stuff. Like, our job is to kind of deliver you there, to those communities, and then kind of prompt you to, okay, you've started your cloud native journey. Let me know how you get on, right? And that's how we end up those stories. Those are stories we grew up with. The first time I went to KubeCon and so showed it to me and I couldn't get it on working on my laptop, and they fixed it. And 2 years later, that person is giving a keynote at KubeCon. Like, those stories are real. We don't make those up, So like, that's the kind of vibe I'm shooting for, with including this stuff, And if you don't like Visual Studio Code, we do. JetBrains has a really cool app called Toolbox, which there's like 4 things named Toolbox or Distribot. Like, there's just a bunch of confusion there, but it downloads a little app and all their products and all that stuff are available there. And you can click, and it's all self-contained in the home directory. It gets all the dependencies you need. So like for Bluefin DX, the developer image, I didn't just want to have VS Code, even though that was overwhelmingly popular in our circles, I feel. But give people that option as well. And then when you start to look for dev containers for things like Vim and stuff, all that stuff is out there because it's been in the wild already. We don't have to. We can reuse existing ecosystem stuff just by saying dev containers are the way. Makes it really easy for us.
Yeah, to tap into those communities. Absolutely. And speaking of sort of democratizing access, maybe we could also talk about how we're sort of democratizing like package managers. So you wrote an article recently on
Yeah.
Homebrew
Mm-hmm.
and how great it is, because I think Homebrew has also switched to an OCI image model, right? Maybe we can showcase
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So I had
Yeah,
a um
let's see.
I don't have a working brew installation here, unfortunately, because I'm in the middle of redoing it, but I can walk
Okay,
you through it.
yeah,
If
maybe we can
actually,
pull up your article
yeah,
and
you know what I do want to show you is I'll just show you their GitHub repo because they do this cool thing. This is a tip. People always ask me, how do you know where all these cool tools are coming from?
oh, I think you'll need to present
Oh, yeah.
again. Here we go. Nope, I gotcha.
All right. So if you go to the homebrew
Yeah.
page, look at these numbers are so bonkers. And a merge pull request, right? For this thing. If you go in the actual pull request, there's a link for the merge queue here. And this shows you a live view of packages being built and going into Homebrew. So what I do is if you look at the pull request, these are all the updates, and these are the closed ones here. These are all the cool Linux tools going right into Homebrew. And the open ones here, this one was open 6 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago. When the human goes around to confirm them or whatever, so I think some of them are bots. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how it works. You'll see them landing in this merge queue here. And what I do is when I have my focus time, I have a side monitor with just the merge queue. And every once in a while, I'll see something with a cool name. I was like, oh, llama thingy. What does that do? And I'll brew info and I'll find out what it is. And it might be interesting to me. And then I tell a friend, and that's how you start to learn where all the cool stuff is. But one of the issues I've had with the kind of traditional Linux distro model is getting new stuff. You see stuff on Hacker News, right? And then you go to the page, and if you're like an Ubuntu or whatever, you're probably out of luck unless it's a project that's been around and has been like submitted and is in Debian. Other than that, you get instructions of using third-party repo. Like they're so just long and convoluted. And the more of those you add, the more fragility to your system has. So when I worked on the Ask Ubuntu Stack Exchange, so many questions where I added some PPA, and just because you wanted a cool tool,
I had that experience, right? You add a PPA, and then you try and update your Ubuntu, and you're like, oh God, something blows up, and you can't upgrade. Yeah,
exactly. So we were kind of the opinion. They're like, well, we're drawing a line anyway between the system and then your workload, right? As we just hopefully have been showing, right? Like all of the dev container stuff you're talking about, that version of Python in there and all that kind of stuff has nothing to do with your system. It's nice and decoupled, and that's what we want. But I still want to get my bling. So I needed a package manager, right? So we had two options. You showed DevBox already, and Brian was like, well, Nix has a bunch of stuff. So he wrote a convenience tool called Fleek, that will install Nix for you. It'll configure, and if you want to do the Nix thing, good luck. It's just too complicated for me. I wasn't going to do
No, that's fair. I mean, in defense though of like Brian Kettleson, he wrote Fleek, right? It was his project.
Oh yeah.
And Fleek makes it actually so easy. It makes it so easy to because you just type in the name. So like Fleek together with DevBox, they had a partnership, and that just allows you to do like DevBox add Python, and it'll just fetch it, and you don't have to worry about all those Nix internals that are really complicated and like
so that was like our first stab at it, right? Because I was like, Brian, I need add, remove, search, and update. All that other stuff. Oh, but I want the home manager stuff. Can you make it sync through my GitHub for me? He's like, anything else, Your Highness? So he kind of made Fleek, and it was pretty cool. And as he was making it, he found DevBox, and he was just so Brian wrote a book on Golang, right? He was like, you should see their code. It's amazing. It's so good. And he was like,
I love their team too.
Reusing a lot of it, and we got to know them because they have their own community, and they've been around. And he was like, I think I could just make Fleek a DevBox plugin of some kind. And it has that dev container export. I recently
Yep.
discovered that. Um,
Yeah.
so the thing about developers is they're never going to pick what they want, right? So I was like, you know what? This handles the Fleet or the Nix people. If Nix people want to do this, there's going to people that go hard and go Nix OS and they want that whole thing. I'm not doing that. Like, Fedora does a great job. Just give me the image. As far as the operating system goes, don't care.
Right.
But I
And
need
that's
those
where
packages.
Bluefin caters to both parties, because it's like, you can just, it's like just DevBox, is it just DevBox or just, it's something like that. And so for the Nix users, they're covered. And for the Brew users, I think it's
Yeah.
just Homebrew or just Brew?
It's going to be just Brew. We're in the middle of changing it. It's Nix DevBox and Nix DevBox Global are the two.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's, normally like installing Nix and then installing DevBox. It's like, it's a whole thing. It's a whole trip, and
Yeah. Yeah.
here it's the Bluefin community's got you covered. It'll
Yeah.
handle setting it up for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're using the Determinate Systems installer. So we're doing it like legit. That when we started this, it didn't run on Silverblue, this style of Fedoras. And Homebrew didn't run either on the host. Some random drive-by was like, I could totally make this Homebrew work on this thing. And we were like, I don't know. Do you think they'll accept the patch or whatever? And the person just submitted it. Homebrew accepted it. And they made a release the next day. It's just great timing. And we just had, all of a sudden, you had Nix and Homebrew available to us. So I really fell in love with Homebrew because they had switched a few years ago to the OCI model, which I showed you earlier, the packages for our operating system.
Yeah.
Right? Look familiar? So
Yeah.
if we look for NVim, or I think just NeoVim.
Are these all OCI images?
Yeah. Look, you can see the download stats and everything. You can Docker pull that thing, I think.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
You can inspect it. You can Scopio it just like we did with Bluefin.
So in other words, like, we're already doing images everywhere, basically.
Exactly.
Bluefin's just touch and base. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I love about this is I'm a Homebrew nerd also, right? So if you have an on-network Docker registry and you configure it right, you get your operating system and your Homebrew packages all cached through a centralized, it's like the app cacher NG, but for the modern world. Like I would love to ship a config that just has all that, so you could just set that up. So for me, it felt like the natural fit. It was just a natural fit. And I went and looked, and proper open source project, GitHub really supports them. So like they have a lot of pulls. Like a lot of people are consuming these. But as you could tell, not that many Mac. This OpenSSL one will be popular. But look, here are the Mac ones, and then look, there it is, Ubuntu.
Yeah.
There it is. They publish metrics, right? So you could see, relatively speaking, what things are popular, and it tells you in the command line, what you have. The only issue I think people are having is when we mention this is like, well, I need a specific version of something, right? Like if I need to roll back 3 versions of HTOP or whatever, I can't do that. And yeah, I kind of wish I could just have a tag that said : and then the version, and then those were available forever. So the Brew is a rolling release thing. So my kind of response to that was, well, usually when you need to pin a specific version of something, it's because you're doing development. And you're doing that in a dev container, right? So you're declaring that in your thing. This is more for your everyday tools, the thing that you want to try, and there's just a lot of useful stuff in there. The mistake that we made, that we literally realized a few days ago, was running it on the host puts it in your path, and that can conflict with apps on your host. So I inadvertently installed a crypto library, PK11, via Brew because something needed it. And my graphical applications, because it was in the path, started to use that, and they would, Steam came up, open SSL error. I was like, what? Why? What?
Right.
And I was like, no, because once you think about it, it's an obvious error, right? Like if you are installing a bunch of stuff ahead of in the path. So I asked her, there's times when you call actual distro maintainers. I was like, oh boy, and they're like, yeah, you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. It's gonna have to go in a container. But Homebrew publishes a Docker container, which is an Ubuntu container that comes with Brew. So we're gonna rejig to that. We're gonna modify Fleek. There's a Fleek Homebrew thing that Brian's working on to make it, hopefully make that nice and easy for you. And then what I want to be able to happen is you open your terminal and then you have whatever distro you want, or what I give you with Brew, and that will handle the, I want Mutt, I want NeoVim, I want all these things that might not be in the Fedora. We use the distribution for the system images and whichever ones you want for your dev containers, and then let Brew kind of handle the everyday Linux tool. Get your Starship prompt, get your Atuin, which is like this cool shell history
thing.
I
love it. I love Atuin, and its maintainer, I think her name is Ellie. Yeah, she's amazing. Follow her on formerly Twitter, now X. She's
me. I definitely sponsor. For sure. I couldn't find that sponsor fast enough. Because
I've only had amazing interactions with her, and this this tool, I've actually shouted it out in our garden newsletter, and it became popular in the office. We have a few users at the office who are using Atuin now to sync their shell history to all their 100%. Other machines, right?
Isn't that
it's amazing?
Yeah,
it's so good.
Yeah, my friend AJ Kerrigan, shout out. He's the same person that told me about Just, I think, actually. It's just being able to connect all these pieces together. Because what I do want when I open my terminal, going back to what Thawkins said about feeling strong and powerful and all that kind of stuff. Now that we know that we have to ship it in a distro box, in a container, we can go a little bit more hardcore. Yeah, because when it's on the host, it's like, well, I want to make sure that when I have I have friends that are, they love Linux and stuff, but they're not ready to swap out their core utils for the Rust ones, right? They have like a date, like that's not a thing they care about, right? So by default, it should stay as Fedora intended, right? And we should not shy away from saying that, right? Like that's what you want. However, when you type just Bluefin CLI and we set it up for you, you could switch to a thing that has Rust core utils, right? Like Atuin built in, with the Starship prompt, and then, kind of sculpt that. When you see a coworker and they got a cool setup and you're like,
they've got the whole, the color scheme, they've got all the highlighting and the autocomplete, and Bluefin is just going to make it really easy out of the box for that.
Yeah, that's what we want to do.
Yeah, we're actually a little over time, so I just wanted to ask you. I've had so much fun. We're just I haven't really noticed until now, but I wanted to just kind of close this fun chat with ask a little bit about what your plans are for the community, and then what your plans are for the future of Bluefin. So specifically around. We mentioned Asahi Linux. Maybe you could go a little bit into that, and just what your plans are to bring Bluefin bring Bluefin into the next stage of maturity. Hatch. Right.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff we're talking about is very bleeding edge, even from a Fedora perspective. And those teams have been really supportive of our work. The OS build team getting us a better installer. The installer is kind of using technology that it's all a little fresh. So now that we know the model is possible, we're waiting for the tooling to catch up, and I'm confident that, that'll really start to mature, hopefully by spring in a better state where it is. And then the other stuff is just getting the word out. I think if you just run it, you're going to find things. I need people like you to actually run it, and then once you figure out.
I just submitted my first bug report today as well, next to my pull request. So what first PR and first bug report today?
So like it's definitely still nascent, right? So we're like open to ideas, like, if like we obviously need to figure out just file structures to be better. Our what other tools, what other patterns can we bring in, and just kind of just mostly telling people that we exist, and to give it a shot. And that's, I'm trying to keep
Yeah.
it simple.
Awesome.
Just show
Yeah,
up to
no,
the party.
please. But
Yeah.
let's end on showing the Project Bluefin webpage, and then we'll say goodbye
Yeah.
to everyone who's joined us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on board. We picked dinosaurs for sustainability reasons. There's a whole story that we can get into later, but I had this artwork done by Jacob Schnur. I commissioned real paleo artists to
I
give us the
love this
artwork.
art.
Yeah.
Yeah, made by humans. It's gorgeous. There's stickers. I have a sticker on my framework laptop.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're trying to.
Yes.
The tech is cool, not gonna lie, but it's got to be a complete story together on why we're doing this, right? Because there's days where you're like, God, I hate Linux so much.
Yeah.
But
when your audio system doesn't work, or
yeah, but
Yeah.
that stuff is getting better, and this is about the delivery pipeline. Getting that, if we can get that helps upstream engineers. If we can fix the pipeline as good SRE cloud nerds, all that does is help those upstream engineers get that goodness to us. And we and once that happens, it's just like what happened with Kubernetes is what I'm hoping for, that explosion of interest and expertise and people having a great time and doing the open source stuff. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, George. And and we'll talk more later, and look forward to getting that PR merged.
Yeah, we got stuff to fix.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, well, back to work.
Thank you.
And talk soon. See, I'm just gonna end.